They called him too young, too reckless, too defiant. But no one could have predicted that Captain Ibrahim Traoré would become the most hunted man in Africa. He didn't climb the ranks by seeking approval. He seized control of a nation on the brink of collapse and had the courage to say no. No to foreign domination, no to corrupt elites, no to the status quo. That made him a target, not just for Burkina Faso's crumbling system, but for a global order that thrived on Africa's submission. From Washington to Paris, whispers turned into orders. Get rid of him. Within his own ranks, betrayal simmered, not for justice, but for jealousy. His only crime? Putting his people first, choosing sovereignty over silence. This wasn't just politics. It was personal. In a continent shaped by puppets and compromise, one man chose defiance. And now, they wanted him gone by any means necessary. Traoré didn't come to negotiate peace when he took power in September 2022. He came for a reckoning. He arrived not in polished suits, but with dust on his boots, a steely edge in his voice, and the weight of a nation on his shoulders. Burkina Faso was in chaos. Terrorism spreading like wildfire, corruption rotting the state from within. The world stood by, silent, offering no outrage, no help. A weak Burkina Faso was profitable for them, but Traoré turned the tables. He demanded foreign troops leave after they failed to protect his people. He canceled military deals that benefited outsiders more than his citizens. Instead of turning to Western diplomats, he looked to his neighbors and his people. That's when the alarms went off. He wasn't following the old rules. He was rewriting them. Some saw him as a soldier, others as a savior. But what terrified his enemies most was what he was becoming. A symbol, not of tyranny, but of independence, not of war, but of a people finally standing tall. While other leaders begged for loans, Traoré spoke of keeping Africa's mineral wealth on the continent. While others feared backlash, he called out neocolonialism directly. While others stayed quiet, he declared, Africa must rise. At the Russia-Africa summit, the world watched in shock as this young captain spoke not like a junior officer, but as the voice of a continent. His words sparked a fire. Suddenly, the Sahel wasn't just stirring, it was roaring, and elites, both African and foreign, felt the ground shift beneath them. They saw what was coming, and they feared it. The battle didn't start with gunfire. It began with whispers. They couldn't stop him through talks, so they turned to darker tactics. Rumors spread within the army. Stories leaked to the press. Anonymous tips reached foreign embassies. He's unstable. He's too extreme. He's dangerous. But the real danger was his clarity. Traoré didn't bow. He didn't waver. He acted. That's when the plots emerged. 15 assassination attempts. 4 coup attempts in a single year. Each one fueled by shadows, money, and men without loyalty. Yet he stood firm, ruling not through fear, but with unwavering resolve. Why him? Why didn't other military leaders in Mali, Niger, Chad, or Gabon face this level threat? Why could their generals sleep more soundly? The answer was clear. Traoré wasn't just a general or a president. He was a revolutionary. He wasn't merely governing a nation. He was awakening a people. That's why they despised him. That's why they attacked him. That's why the bullets kept coming. Burkina Faso, once overlooked, was now in the spotlight. This young, unknown man had become the most dangerous leader on the continent, without ever firing a shot at the West. It all nearly ended on April 16th, 2025, a day meant to erase everything Traoré had built. Another coup, another betrayal, but this time it was perilously close to succeeding. The plan was precise, silent, and swift, disguised movements in the early dawn, high-ranking officers with familiar faces, soldiers already inside the gates. They didn't come with demands. They came to destroy, if not for a single intercepted message, a stroke of luck in the chaos. Burkina Faso might have lost its leader that day, but fate had other plans. So did Traoré. The attackers disappeared. Some were arrested, but most escaped, not into the bush or back streets, but across the border into Ivory Coast, a supposed ally. When Traoré's enemies crossed into this so-called brother country, they weren't hunted. They were welcomed as guests, given shelter, silence, and a space to plot again. The air carried the undeniable scent of foreign influence. France was never officially named, but locals whispered and intelligence spoke louder. In the Ivorian capital, a new operational center had formed, funded, equipped, and protected. Its mission: finish what April 16 failed to do. Traoré didn't go on television to shout accusations or beg for international help. Instead, he got to work. He gathered his closest team, called in intelligence officers from across the country, and began dismantling everything around him, not out of fear, but with calculated precision. What emerged was more than a response. It was a doctrine, the lockdown doctrine. This was no longer politics, as usual. It was a complete system overhaul. People, protocols, power. Nothing and no one would escape scrutiny. He started with the Presidential Guard, the very men sworn to protect him. The truth was harsh. The enemy wasn't just outside the walls. Some wore the same uniform. Traitors had sold secrets. Officers had taken bribes to stay silent. Others had simply looked away. In that silence, coups were born. So Traoré made a decision no other regional leader had dared. He wiped the slate clean. This wasn't just a few dismissals or a press statement. It was a full restructure. Names were removed without warning. Some vanished quietly. Others were reassigned far from the capital, never to return. In their place came new faces, not just loyal, but proven. Every recruit was vetted like never before. Family history, political ties, foreign contacts, even social media posts from years past. If there was any doubt, they were out. No mercy, no risk. This wasn't just about protection. It was about survival. Meanwhile, intelligence warnings grew louder. The April 16th coup was just a rehearsal. The real attack, they said, would come before June 2025. Bigger, better funded, international. With traitors now based in Ivory Coast, possibly backed by exiled commanders. The next strike could come anywhere, anytime. Traoré tightened his circle. Meetings became brief, hushed, and small. His location was never fixed. His meals tested and monitored. Every suspicious call, leak, or strange movement in the capital reported instantly. From now on, every second mattered. This was no longer about political power. It was war. A war fought not on television, but in whispers, shadows, and secret bank accounts. Yet it always came down to one goal. Traoré must fall. That was the mission for the traitors, foreign sponsors, and even some African elites clinging to the past. But he was still here, still breathing, still standing, still rewriting the rules. The revolution didn't sleep, neither did the man leading it. What do you do when your greatest threat isn't in front of you, but silently behind you? That's the question Traoré had to answer, not in theory, but in real time. Betrayal didn't come with a warning. It came dressed in uniform, saluting him every morning. After the failed April coup, Traoré didn't just get angrier. He got smarter. He realized the system he inherited was never meant to protect a leader like him. It was designed to control, to watch, to report to others, not to shield a revolutionary. So he issued a quiet but firm command. Burn it down and rebuild it. From that order, the lockdown doctrine was born. Loyalty over rank, surveillance over ceremony. The old ways were dead. No more promotions based on seniority. No more titles earned through flattery and false loyalty. The only thing that mattered now was trust, earned and verified. The Presidential Guard, once a symbol of prestige, became a symbol of scrutiny. Every officer was evaluated. Their files, their families, their private conversations, their unexplained bank transactions. Some tried to lie. Others thought old connections would save them. They were wrong. In a single week, dozens were removed. No explanation, no press release, just gone. Those who stayed were stripped of privilege and put to the test. The new guard wasn't about appearances. It was about survival. These men weren't just bodyguards. They were soldiers of the revolution. They trained harder, slept less, moved like shadows. Their orders were clear. Protect the vision, not just the man. And just in case anyone was tempted to betray, surveillance was everywhere. Every hallway, every message, every unscheduled movement monitored, logged, flagged. Burkina Faso wasn't just defending itself. It was watching itself. The traitors of the last coup had exposed a weakness Traoré couldn't ignore: outdated communication systems. Messages leaked, plans intercepted. Soldiers moved without oversight. It was chaos. So he made a drastic change. Out went the old tech. In came encrypted military-grade communication systems. Secure lines only, real-time tracking, signal disruption tools. Anyone, soldier, commander, minister, who sent unauthorized messages was flagged instantly. Those caught didn't get a warning. They were removed. In war, slow responses mean death. Then came the boldest move yet. Traoré reactivated a long-dormant agency, the Office of Internal Counterintelligence. Once used to monitor external threats, it now turned inward. Every minister, every governor, every top-ranking officer, no one was exempt. Their alliances, foreign contacts, secret meetings, suspicious phone calls were all examined. If their views didn't align with the revolution, they were removed quietly, far from the capital. Some were sent to remote provinces, others reassigned to ceremonial roles with no real power. If they protested, they were reminded of the fate of those who didn't listen the last time. Traoré knew he wasn't the first to walk this path. He knew the story of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon, gunned down by his closest friend. A man who died because he trusted too much. Traoré refused to repeat that mistake. Where Sankara showed mercy, Traoré showed vigilance. Some called it paranoia, but in West Africa, paranoia is protection. Every African revolutionary is only loved when he's dead. Alive, he's a threat. This wasn't a democracy. To Traoré, Burkina Faso wasn't an election season. It was a survival season. You don't fight coups with polite speeches or face foreign agents with press conferences. You do it with discipline, with walls, with eyes in every room. That's what the lockdown doctrine was, a firewall, because what was coming next would be darker, faster, more ruthless, and only a nation on lockdown could survive it. They thought Traoré would rely on soldiers, on polished uniforms and medals from foreign military schools. But he places faith in ordinary people, farmers, teachers, students, ex-miners. That's how the VDP was born. The volunteers for the defense of the homeland. They weren't trained in fancy barracks or funded by foreign donors. They were armed with something stronger, loyalty and pain. These were men and women who'd seen their villages burn, who'd buried sons and daughters, who knew that if they didn't protect their homes, no one would. A people's army. When Traoré created the VDP, it wasn't just to fight terrorists, it was to build a second backbone for the country, an immune system from within. These volunteers didn't wear suits. They wore scars. They weren't just defenders. They were believers. In a nation where betrayal had infected even the military, the VDP became a new weapon, one no foreign hand could manipulate, one no bribe could buy. These weren't just fighters. They were the soul of the revolution. After the April coup attempt, everything changed. The capital nearly fell. Enemies walked through military gates with ease. But while the traitors fled to Ivory Coast, the VDP didn't run. They evolved. Traoré gave them a new mission. They wouldn't just protect remote villages. They'd guard the revolution itself. The VDP were quietly deployed to key administrative zones, military outposts, and government offices. But they weren't just standing guard. They were watching. Every VDP member became a censor, a reporter, a whisper catcher. Suspicious behavior was reported directly to the presidency. Unusual movements by army officers were flagged. Secret meetings behind closed doors were documented. What the traditional army couldn't see, the VDP could sense. Because they weren't part of the military structure, they couldn't be easily infiltrated. They didn't answer to generals. They answered to the country. This wasn't militia anymore. It was a living firewall against betrayal. Critics laughed, calling it unsophisticated, saying Traoré was relying on amateurs. But these so-called amateurs had done what the professional army couldn't. They held the line village after village, without air support or backup. Now, they were defending more than dirt roads and small farms. They were defending a dream. The VDP couldn't be bought because most had already lost everything. They weren't fighting for power. They were fighting for purpose. They didn't need salaries. They needed justice. That's what made them terrifying to Traoré's enemies. You can't bribe pain. You can't negotiate with memory. You can't stop a farmer who's buried his child and still picks up a weapon to protect the next village. This was a force built on survival, not politics. By deploying the VDP across the country, Traoré sent a message. You may hide behind borders. You may plot from embassies. But my people are awake now and they're watching. Every town now had guardians, not just a mayor. Every military base had shadows, not just command. The coup plotters weren't just hunted by intelligence services. They were surrounded by villagers who looked ordinary but saw everything. The VDP was an army of the state. It was a heartbeat of a people who decided they would never kneel again. What do you think about Traoré's fight for Burkina Faso's future? Share your thoughts in the comments below.